Welcome back to the shop, everyone. Today we have special guest Camilla George, who is here to chat with me on this video about all things saxophone, life and music. And we have got an interesting topic for you today in that we are going to be discussing how to become a successful artist, whether that's as a saxophone player or anything else, I'm sure. And Camilla, of course, is the perfect person to discuss this topic because she is indeed a successful artist, and she's also a Selmer Paris artist. So we're very grateful to Selmer Paris for setting us up for this video, and in fact providing Camilla with this signature saxophone which she is now playing. So I'm sure we'll get onto that later on, but in the meantime let's crack on with the video. Well, I think we'll start things by, I'm always interested in finding out why people begin in the first place. What encouraged you to want to pick up the saxophone, or was there another instrument or musical inclination before the saxophone perhaps?
It was pretty much always saxophone. So I was really lucky. My dad was really into jazz. Okay. I didn't know actually at the time that my granddad, his dad was a jazz saxophonist in Grenada, where my dad is from. Sure. And so my dad every Sunday used to sit me down and I'd sit on his knee and we'd listen to his vinyl collection, and he had some absolute bangers. You know, we'd listen to Sonny Stitt, Stanley Turrentine, Sidney Bechet, and he'd actually seen them, you know, been to the concerts, so he would tell me about the concerts, and that's kind of how I got into the love of jazz music. And then when I was 8, a friend of my mum's boyfriend had a saxophone. It was a tenor, and he'd left it on a stand, and nobody had been able to get a sound out of it. And I was always quite a small child, and I just bowled up and got a sound and was like, right, that's it, I want to play sax.
It's so exciting, isn't it, that moment when you part down a saxophone, you hit and you get that immediate reward of the sound. I think that's one of the great things about the saxophone, isn't it? The fact that it's so instantly accessible in terms of producing a sound. Perhaps not a nice, rounded, delightful sound, but nonetheless something that's recognisable.
Yeah, and was definitely a bit of a foghorn, but I was really into it. But my parents were, very much like, I mean, at that time as well, they didn't really have alpha saxes, so I didn't have the opportunity to learn sax that young. So it wasn't until I got to secondary school and they had a music competition, and if you won you could get a couple of lessons for free and then choose to continue, and I did win, and I chose saxophone.
Congratulations. And then at this stage they give you a saxophone and then you start having lessons?
There was one that I think that I had a try and a lesson, and then we rented one, and I just remember when I got it home and just opening up the case and seeing the kind of the lining of the case, and I can still see it now, me, my mum and my dad all in the living room just in wonder as you open up this amazing case and see the instrument. Yeah,
I have a very similar recollection of that experience. For me, it was they gave me a saxophone from the school cupboard, and I take it home so excited, and it's just that moment of opening it up, and like you say, everything about it. It's the inside of the case, the smell,
it's amazing.
All of this.
Yeah, the smell.
It beds itself in the memory, doesn't it? That is fabulous. And then from that point onwards, were you sort of hooked, and that was it? It was like, I must practice every day. I've got a bee in my bonnet, and I want to, kind of hack this thing and work out.
Yeah, I was definitely keen. When we first started lessons, I had joint lessons with this boy, and we were very competitive. So I didn't want him to be better than me in the lessons, so that definitely made me practice. Right. And that started getting into the discipline of it, although my mum still did have to nag me. I wasn't one of those that was voluntarily always going upstairs to practice. Right. But I loved it. And then I found Samor Warriors, and I just got my sax. I was 11, and
so where were you at the time? Where
I was at school, secondary school, in London.
In London, right? So when did you move to London?
I've been in London most of my life.
Right.
I was born in Nigeria.
Yes.
And we came over. Well, we weren't supposed to come back, but my dad got deported, so that was kind of why we came home.
Yeah.
Came here, but yeah, we were in London, and I went to school slightly outside of London, in a place called Ruislip.
Sure.
And there was a gig on Jazz Jamaica gig in Harrow Arts Centre, and my mum took me to that after school.
Okay.
And I was just in awe. I got to hear Dennis Baptiste. It was Jason Yard.
Yeah.
I mean, it
all-star lineup.
It was so good.
And it made a big impression on you.
It made a massive impression, and I again bowled up to them. And I remember saying to Dennis quite cheekily, like, I'm going to be like you. I've just started saxophone, and he was just like, okay.
Yeah.
But Gary and Janine took me under their wing from that point, and so then I had help, you know, in terms of developing myself.
Okay, wonderful. And then in terms of other aspects of music, was it all about the saxophone really at this stage, or did you sort of have ideas of, look, I want to take the saxophone and develop myself as an artist and do something with this, you know, having been influenced by what you'd just seen in that gig? Or was it still kind of a case of, I want to crack this thing and kind of work on my saxophone chops for a while. I don't quite know what I'm doing, you know, in life yet, but certainly that was perhaps a pivotal moment for you.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think I was someone that I always wanted to do sax, and I don't think I was thinking so much really about being an artist. Although I did want to be where they were, but I didn't understand how to get there.
Yeah.
But it was definitely saxophone for me. However, as I said, my granddad was a saxophone player, and he had let's just say, the kind of reputation that you might think of a typical jazz musician. Several different setups and different islands, surrounding islands.
Yeah.
So my dad was not that keen for me to do music. I was academic, so I actually went to Birmingham to do ancient and medieval history for my undergrad.
Right.
And that's where I met Soweto, and I started having lessons with him, and was lucky to be able to, allowed into the conservatoire to sit in on lessons, etc. But I wasn't a student. And it was when I finished that I did my postgrad and went to Trinity.
Right.
But I definitely had a different way into it, much like Soweto, who also, I think he went to Oxford.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I heard Soweto many years ago at Love Supreme Festival. I was just bowled over by what he can produce on stage, just, you know, not just the saxophone, but everything.
Yeah.
He's an all-round artist. And I can see why he would have been, you know, a strong influence on you at that stage in your career.
Yeah, and I remember going, even in his house, he had his Mobo Award in the toilet. So I was like, wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite something. Yeah, I also studied at Birmingham as well. It's parallels. Yeah, but it was at the Conservatoire. I was actually an oboist at the time, so I was always interested in the guys doing the jazz courses. Although the jazz course wasn't particularly established then, it's been much more of a thing in recent years in Birmingham. But really good music scene, jazz scene in Birmingham. In
there is, yeah, it was great. I actually really loved it there.
Yeah, fabulous. So you didn't go down the traditional undergrad path, as it were, but in a way, was that a problem, or did that just set you up in a different way from that point onwards?
I think it was like good and bad. The bad thing was, I think it did hold me back in terms of technically. I was still going, you know, they were very nice. I was able to sit in at the Conservatoire. I was having great lessons with Soweto, and later on with Jean Toussaint, which is great. But I wasn't getting the intensity that you do get when you do an undergrad jazz course. So I had a lot of ground to cover. So that was definitely a setback. But the plus of it, having put that work in and then gone and done the postgrad, was that I've got a different take on life. So I'm coming at it from a different angle. Also, I think from a point of just, I guess, was it mental health? Having friends that are not all musicians has been hugely beneficial.
Right.
And that sounds a bit weird.
Because it can get very cliquey, can't it, the whole college environment? You're surrounded by everyone doing the same thing. And when you do have that separation, it just gives you maybe a different perspective that could be perhaps healthy in a way, especially for that stint, the 4-year stint, which, undergrad is like the lion's share of our study, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely think that I had other life experiences during that time, which I think have shaped me.
Right, interesting. And then it got into the serious stuff when you're in postgraduate mode. And at that stage, are you really picking it up, like picking up the pace and doing intense practice and kind of getting your technical chops in and, inspired to sort of attain the next level on your instrument?
I think the most intense practice and work and advancement for me personally happened after college. During college, I had a few other things. My dad sadly passed away, so that really kind of and also I think it's these things is about connections with the right teachers, and I think, although it was great, it was a great experience. I think it's the best and worst of times, and I think everyone probably says that about music college. I do think it showed me how to practice and what I needed to do. And I felt when I was at college that I was far below a lot of the other players. So it really gave me a kick to be like, look, this is where you need to be. There's some of the amazing saxophone players that I happened to be at college with at that time.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny, the whole thing of perspective, isn't it? When you look back, sometimes you think, if I could have that time again, because, you only realise in hindsight that it's this golden opportunity to really put in the miles. And then, of course, later on in life gets in the way, and you're doing X, Y, and Z, even it's your dedicated sort of sole purpose in life to play the saxophone. But of course, I'm sure you're doing plenty of other things that, take you away from that, such that you can't put in that amount of time that you would have had back then. I'm talking from experience. Definitely. Here, you can tell, as I say, for me at music college. But that's just life, isn't it?
It is just life. And I've got a very talented young student who's just joined a jazz course in London and a conservatoire, and that's what I can see for him. I can just see he's just at this start of this great journey where all he wants to do is practice, and it's amazing.
So you just encourage him to just do it now whilst you've got the chance. So you've now graduated. So what's the next step? Where do we go next?
Well, I was lucky. When I was at college, I was still playing in Jazz Jamaica. I actually got into Jazz Jamaica. The first gig that I went to, ended up being in the band.
That is fabulous.
Yeah, it's
so
great.
So there you are loving it as a youngster, and now you're getting into the band.
And now I'm in the band. Yeah. So that was my only gig, really. But it was great because it was giving me gigging experience. But I got a call from Courtney Pine, and he was doing a project called the Venus Warriors, focusing on female jazz musicians. And at the time it was me, I think he called Nabaya, Rosie Turton on trombone, I think Sheila Maurice Graham, 100% sure. And we all had to, everyone was bringing a composition.
Right.
And I hadn't written anything. And he really took me to task in a nice way and said, you can't just be bringing standards. You need to be writing stuff. And so that was 2012, 2013, I believe.
Right.
And then in 2014, I put together my project. And, at first I will hold my hands up to say I don't think the tunes were the best, but I was learning and I just wanted to be bringing material that was mine and to be playing it with people that I wanted to play with. And that I was very lucky to have been surrounded by a very good group of people. The original band members of Femi Colioso on drums, Daniel Casimir on bass, and Sarah Tandy on piano. And 10 years later, we're still going.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. Yeah, what a journey, and a great way to showcase your compositions as well. In that setting with that lineup of musicians.
Yeah, and I think we all learned as we were going on because we were all at the beginning of our journey. They were side people in my projects, but they were also beginning to do their own projects. And actually, when we did our first album tour, that was when Ezra Collective were just taking off. And I remember seeing how much work Femi was having to do in order to make that band progress onto the level that we are at now.
And it's absolutely paid off. Saw them in the Concorde some months back, blown away. And of course, they've just, since then, it's just been doing this. It's astounding.
They did Wembley Stadium, 9,000 people.
I heard that on the radio. It sounded fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Jazz Jamaica thing is really special and unique. And do you think that sort of speaks to the heart of what you do in terms of that, that hybrid of styles? Do you think that really sort of touches to your core in terms of, your musical voice?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely influenced by doing that band. I think for me, in terms of writing and creating a voice, which is something that I was very lucky to have been helped with understanding about, creating a kind of a story of my music. It's all about reflective mainly of my Nigerian heritage and the bits that are important within that. So our mythology, our religion, etc.
Yes, yeah. I love the, talking about your journey as you're progressing now as a solo artist. There've been a few albums and they all have a very specific purpose in terms of touching on that sort of Nigerian heritage. I love the notion of those albums, particularly the last one. Was that your last album, 2022?
Yes, Ibio, yeah.
Yes, I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, so I'm glad that you've done that before I have. Yeah, it sounds absolutely wonderful. So we've taken the journey up to the present day in terms of, now you're a solo artist, you've produced these 3 albums. 3 albums, am I correct?
3, yeah.
Yes, yeah, fabulous. And what have you learned along the way in terms of being, developing your own voice, which is sort of separate from the, collab work, I suppose, maybe the work that you've been doing with Jazz Jamaica? How's that a departure for you, and what experiences did you draw from, or lessons did you draw from that, developing your solo voice compared to the Jazz Jamaica stuff?
I think it's something that I talk about quite a lot with my band members, particularly like some of the young ones that are going into doing their own project.
Yeah.
It is you wear a different hat when you are doing a project and you are the artist, because for lots of reasons, there's a lot of responsibility on making sure the music is right. But also from a practical point of view with touring, somebody said this to me the other day, and it's like, and it really made me think, you have a duty of care.
Yes.
When you take people out on the road, you have a duty of care. And so you step away from it just being about you getting your part right on the gig. It has to be about...
It's like hosting a party, isn't it, maybe?
Exactly,
and
yeah.
you sort of almost, you're not in the same state of relaxation if you're the guest. You just fly into the party. Yeah, what's going on? Whereas when you're in charge,
it's all
you're
a bit,
looking after everyone. I can now imagine
stressful,
that.
yeah. And you have to find a way. It's taken me a while to be able to find a balance between executing that duty of care and making sure everybody has been taken care of, and also being able to perform, because it's at the end of the day your project. And I think when you're starting off on that journey, I think those things are tricky to balance, but you do get there. And I think it's just a case of making sure you look after you and also having an eye out for your band, because if you don't do that, you'll find you won't have people that want to play with you, no matter how killing you are or how good the music is.
It sounds like you firmly recognise that, and that's probably, enjoyed by your fellow musicians. They can probably see that you obviously have that duty of care. If you hadn't mentioned it, then it would be absent and you'd have some annoyed band musicians, but clearly that is there. So that's already some great advice that we can pass on to the people. Just thinking about our audience here, because most of the people watching these videos, they're not necessarily on your level, and establishing themselves up there, with a big public profile. But I think there'd be a lot of musicians out there looking to write music and looking to maybe promote their music perhaps locally on a smaller scale, and not maybe just play jazz standards in the corner of the pub. So for those people, is there something specifically that you can help them with advice-wise in terms of getting themselves to that level, whether it's on a practical level like you've mentioned before, you've got all the practical side of things, venue bookings, all of the sort of red tape side of things. There's plenty to think about, right?
There's a lot to think about, and I've been there. So in 2014, when I was just doing it on my own, I even went as far as, probably shouldn't admit it here, but anyway, I created a kind of a manager agent that was just me.
Right.
I just made another email address.
Okay.
And pretended that I had an agent at some point, just to elevate myself, because I kept going to some of the venues and either they don't reply or they're rude, but there was a difference when it was my supposed agent.
It's amazing the things you have to do, but it obviously it's worked, it's paid off. So there's a tip right there.
That's a tip. Probably, I don't know. I think I read that Hugh Grant used to do that. So if it worked for him, I think that being really proactive and knowing every aspect of the business, I think, is a thing. It's something that for anyone that's starting out, you're in a good position, because I think there are some people with how the scene is now who may have come in and missed those stages where you're scrabbling around to get gigs and people don't want to book you.
Sure.
And they don't know about certain elements like how to book a gig, looking through contracts and stuff. The MU is really good for stuff like that,
Yeah.
And if you're a student, I believe it used to be £20. I don't know if I'm sure.
I'm not sure, but that sounds very reasonable. And if you can get the advice from the MU, then take it.
Yeah, I would say the MU are good. They also have lists of people that have been blacklisted as well, because I had it definitely in the early days. Struggles with some, you do a gig, you didn't get paid. Sure. And then you can see whether the people that have booked you are on that list,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. And in terms of just, you are the centre of your act and you've got other people around you and you're writing the music for these people. Is there any sort of advice in terms of just how to go about doing this? I know this is probably a much bigger topic in terms of writing your own material and making it, having the confidence to believe in it, and for other people to jump on board that. Sometimes I would imagine it can feel daunting to actually, write some music that you really want the other people that you're collaborating with to be a part of and to be kind of proud of it and to really want to be on board with you. Is there anything that any advice you can give to people in terms of writing their own music and having the confidence to put that out there?
Yeah, I think keep doing it is the first one, because I think we self-select, don't we? Like, oh gosh, that's awful, and then throw it away. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that I've discarded initially that I've come back to and then used for something else. So I'd say that's a thing. I do think having a story in your music is good. Now, not everyone writes like that, so I'm just maybe saying personally, because I find it does work for me. I think it also does work for journalists as well, because I think people are not only the musicians that you're playing with, but people that are listening to it, people that want to write about your music, want to understand what it is that you're...
If there's a narrative there, something to latch onto.
And I think if you've got that and you can put it in a package, and not in a cynical way, like, oh, I'm going to write this because this is popular and I'm just going to do this.
Sure.
But something that means that is, genuine to you, I think, and if you can build some, can work out and articulate what the narrative is, I think that's
probably
very
helpful for you as well. You know what you're doing, and then the other people get it as well. So it just helps everyone.
Yeah, I think so.
That's wonderful. So in the intro, I mentioned signature Selmer saxophones, and we're sporting a pair of fine modern Selmer saxophones here. This is your own signature. I happen to have a Supreme here, so we might not be talking about this too much, but Camilla, in general, what's your relationship with saxophone gear?
Yeah, I mean, I can be a bit nerdy for gear, but in terms of setups, I don't really change it. I had an awful experience not that long ago where my mouthpiece, beloved mouthpiece of many, many years, dropped on carpet and broke.
Okay.
And it's taken me a while, and I'm still not sure if I'm there with the mouthpiece that I've got.
What mouthpiece was it that broke?
It wasn't really a fancy mouthpiece. It was an Eisen, but it was a copy. They don't do it now. It was a copy of the New York Mayette. They have the new ones, but they're not the same as that old one that I had. That was great.
It's always the great one that breaks, isn't it? And then you try and find something else to replicate it, and it's never quite the same. You hear these stories all too often.
So yeah, I don't like to change mouthpieces that much. Ligatures I haven't really changed, although there was someone I saw one the other day, I thought maybe. And reeds, I'm not massively fussed on reeds as long as they work. I've even gone back to the Jazz Select ones just because...
Right. Yeah, snap.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the fact that you can choose a different, softness.
Yeah, there's more gradations.
There's more, there's more than others.
Sure. And then in terms of the instrument itself, we were chatting before the video. You've obviously had a lot of experience on the old vintage Selmers.
Yes.
And, still have a lot of love for those instruments. We can't take that away. They are wonderful instruments. Selmer Mark 6 is especially your one. But you've recently discovered this signature saxophone. How did this come about, the discovery of this instrument and the fact that you now have it on your lap and are playing it?
I know. Well, I was very, very lucky. I got asked by Selmer, who were working with Samor Warriors, and I'm now a trustee at Samor Warriors. And I met the bigwigs at Selmer.
Yes.
And they invited me to do a music video with a French tenor sax player, and I was loaned the signature, and I took it home actually, and they allowed me to practice on it, and I really enjoyed playing it. And I have to say, I haven't played a modern horn for quite some time actually, and it was lovely. And I've really enjoyed getting to know this instrument. It's different to my six for definite.
Yeah, I mean, when you've been playing an instrument for so long, especially an old vintage one that's got such a defined tone, has just been part of your voice as you establish yourself as a musician, it is hard to suddenly adapt, even if it is a wonderful sax like this is. I mean, I'm always singing the praises of this new signature. Love the Supreme as well. In fact, we did a bit of a video on these two compared just a week ago or so, because there's so much sort of this is so much in the conversation, this Supreme, but I also believe, and we believe here, that this signature has so much to offer as well. You know, it's a reinvention of or an evolution of the Series 2, which was always a special saxophone for many players.
Yeah, definitely. And I had a Series 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, it's going to sort of work for you from that point of view. And you're pairing now with, so it's a Mayer mouthpiece, is it?
I've got a Mayer one.
Yeah. And what's this fancy ligature you've got there? It's
a Roffner. It's just a metal version,
Yeah. They're really cool. Nice. I mean, they're all the bling, aren't they? But you've got to have a little bit of bling on your setup. But it sounds great. I love the fact that overall, sound-wise, you produce a really naturally dark sound.
Yeah.
Which is, it's funny because, we're talking about gear here, but when we're talking about the true sound of the sax player, it comes mainly from the player.
Yes.
We'll always say that when we're in discussions about it, as much as you can talk about the reed and the mouthpiece and all the rest of it. Yes, it makes a difference. But that dark sound that you produce definitely comes from you. I'm a much brighter player, and sometimes I'm trying to find that darkness there. It can be to do with things, shapings here and what have you, can't it? But it sounds wonderful, and especially I think it helps when you're an alto player, because the alto can be a bit twee, being up there, can't it? And so it's trying to add that tenderness, that depth to it, which if you naturally have that in the way you play, then that balances it out and can give the right overall sound that you produce.
I think it's like your speaking voice, isn't it? I've got quite a lower voice, so I think I've always thought that's why. I don't know.
Yeah, could be something to do with it. Yeah, the sort of, you've got a large chamber here. It's not just the chamber in the mouthpiece, it's the chamber in this as well. Yeah, no, it sounds absolutely fabulous. So great. Well, we've talked about gear. I think it'd just be nice to round this off by asking you about where you're up to now and your future plans. Where does Camilla in 2025 take us?
Well, hopefully I'll finish writing this new music, which I'm going to do over Christmas. I mentioned that I started my project in 2014, 10 years of my band. So we've got a big celebration gig on the 9th of January at Ronnie Scott's.
Lovely.
And we've done some arrangements of pieces from all 3 albums with a bigger band.
Okay. Ooh.
So it's going to be fun.
Take it to the next level.
Yeah, it's going to be quite good fun. I can't wait.
I think I might have to get myself some tickets for this.
I think you're going to come down.
Sounds great. Fabulous. Well, it's been really lovely to chat to you and have this conversation and listen to you play as well. It sounds absolutely fabulous. Thanks so much for coming down to the store and talking to us. And wonderful. This has been Camilla George, and we shall see you on another video soon.